Hey, I'm Dan Pascone, CEO of Tailored Wealth and host of the Making Sense of Your Money podcast, where every conversation is built around one idea, that your money is a tool to design and live your version of a rich life. So if you have kids heading toward college, you already know the quiet math that's probably running in the back of your mind, the sticker prices on colleges that could be north of 100 grand a year, and the sense that maybe you make too much to get help, but not enough for it not to hurt. And that dangerous little voice that says, they work so hard, I'll just figure it out. That's exactly the trap that can quietly cost you a decade of your retirement when planning for college tuition. So today I'm joined by Shanna Due, founder of Due Financial and a specialist who helps families get the college experience they actually want for the least amount of investment. We get into why the sticker price is almost never what you pay, how to decode a school's real business model, the financing moves most parents miss, and how to turn a six-figure decision into numbers that a 17-year-old and their parents can actually wrap their arms around. But before we get into it, make sure that you're subscribed on your favorite platform. And if the show's adding value, I'd appreciate a quick review. Thanks and enjoy the episode.
Brought to you by Tailored Wealth, helping business leaders live their version of a rich life.
Welcome to another edition of the Making Sense of Your Money podcast, where we cut through the financial noise and help business leaders to make smart, confident money decisions. All right, Shanna, thanks for joining Making Sense of Your Money. I'm excited to chat with you today. It's going to be fun.
I'm so excited to be here, Dan. I love making sense of money. Like, that's what I do around here.
It is absolutely what you do. You and I have gotten to know each other a little bit through the Advisors Growth Community, which is a great community of kind of like-minded, growth-oriented financial advisors and planners. And you've done a lot of good work there and been a part of now 2 books, which we'll get into. But tell the audience a little bit about your day job and what drew you to what you do and how you help families today.
Oh, awesome. I'd love to. So many facets to me. So I'll go to the most recent. I'm kind of a career changer into this financial planning world. I've only been in it for about 10 years. And I used to be a full-on financial planner, much just like you do every day. And most of our clients were younger professionals, people who'd kind of been in their careers post-college, about 10 years or so. And I started seeing a recurring theme amongst them. A lot of them were having to delay what you and I might call milestones, buying a house, paying off massive amounts of debt, having children. And they were having to make some really serious trade-off decisions because of their student loan debt in their portfolio of financial situation. And I thought, every time I would talk to them and we were starting to talk about how are you going to do this and how can we make all these things happen, I was like, if I had just met you 14 years ago before you started this, journey, you might not be where you are today. Or if you are, you would have at least been prepared for what it was going to be. So that sparked me breaking off from my old firm, great firm, but I decided to do my own thing, started Due Financial. And that is only what I focus on right now, is just helping families make the best financial choice to get the experience they want from college for the least amount of investment.
All right. A lot we can get into there.
Yes.
How do you, I'm going to try and break this up and make it not such a big question, not such a, a tough question, but how do you get the most out of college while paying the least money? Like what does that entail?
So the very first thing that I do with clients is we figure out what is that college experience that we're looking for. And by we, I mean the client and their family, the student, and then anyone else who might be contributing to that cost. What is it they actually want from it? And where is the best place to get that? So I kind of describe it this way when I start out with clients. It's like a 3-legged table. So we start out with the table, and on top of that table, we're going to put everything we want out of college. So maybe it's a community experience. Maybe it's practical knowledge on how to do a specific skill set, critical thinking skills, maybe some self-discovery. Maybe it's that alumni network they're looking for, internship experience, all those kind of things. Like, what do we want from this experience?
Yep.
And then there are a 3-legged table to get that. There's the academic fit. Does it have the major I need? Is it best suited to advance me in that career if I know what that career is going in? Is it the type of place that I want to study at? Do they teach the way I best learn? And
Sure.
then there's the social fit. Like, is it a big school? Is it a small school? Is it an urban school? Is it a rural school? Does it have a huge Greek life, big sports, like all those kind of things?
Sure.
And then my favorite part, what's the financial implications of going to that school? Um, and then there are several ways we can look at making the least amount of that investment. If you want me to go there, or I can wait. I see the wheels turning. You have a question.
The wheels are turning. We're going to unpack all of those. So my first question is this. Um, I love your process for sort of thinking about a university. It's probably very similar to like thinking about buying a home or whatever the case may be.
Uh-huh.
It's like the filters that you want to look through. So when families come to you, how much do they typically know already about like the college experience that they're looking for? And how much are you helping them to sort of do that fact finding and that discovery experience? Very similar to what we see in financial planning conversations.
Yeah, that's a great question. Most of the families that come to me, hopefully they've come from like a webinar that I've done. So that
Got
helps a lot. If they haven't, most people they've already done the research into schools of kind of what kind of school they want to go to.
it.
They're still trying to figure out how each of the schools runs. There are schools that don't require you to determine a major until your sophomore year. There are other schools that say you have to know it going into, like nursing and business. You have to apply for those going into it.
Got it.
So they tend to know a little bit about the school and kind of what they're looking for. They do not, majority of families do not understand how this financial end of it works at all. And I won't say it's like nefarious on the college's part, but it is opaque, and some of it is opaque by design.
Yeah.
Um, and I won't call it nefarious, even though sometimes I wonder,
Yeah, sure. Sure.
but it is opaque and it's not clear. And every school kind of has its own model. And that's really hard for parents to figure out.
All right. I want to get into the financial piece, obviously, but as far as all the other stuff, like the experience type stuff,
Mhm.
what type of once you get them to kind of figure out like maybe a prioritization of like what we're looking for, what size school, what type of experience, how you like to learn, the majors, all of that stuff. Do you just have like a database that you're able to kind of filter through to kind of prioritize those? Or like, what is the process for like matching up a family's needs with like a subset of schools that's not super overwhelming, but that checks the majority of their boxes?
Yeah, so because I focus mostly on the financial side, I don't get into a lot of like the academic fit and the social fit as much. But what I do try and do for clients, especially when we come to the financial side, is what is that worth to you?
Right.
So I'll give you an instance that's pretty clear. If I have someone who's going into architecture, there are only so many schools in the country that are certified architectural schools. So it is important that you go to one of those undergraduate programs. Now, there are some that are strictly undergraduate, there's 5-year programs, there's 6-year programs. So that's one of those majors where we don't have as much flexibility of, do you have to go to this school to get the education you want? There are other majors out there that you can go to pretty much any university out there and you're going to be just fine. An extreme example I would use is like, I want to be a teacher. I don't recommend typically, unless you have a vast amount of resources, that you would go to an Ivy League school that offers no merit aid. And if you don't have need, they're very generous on need, but if you don't have a need, they're not going to give you any money. So I would not, if your finances were tight, I would not go to Harvard for an education degree because you can get an education degree anywhere and go out and find work as a teacher,
Right.
right? It doesn't require a specific school to get
Right.
what you need for your future. And those are kind of two extremes of like, yes, you have to go to the school or you can go get that anywhere. So let's prioritize what the money means. What is that financial implication to both the parents, grandparents, and the student, and especially over the long term?
Got it. Okay. That makes a lot of sense. Now let's talk about the financial piece.
Okay.
When families come to you, I'm curious, what do they not know? Like, what are the biggest like misconceptions about financing a college education?
I think there's two things. One is just to understand that each of these higher education institutions, while they may be nonprofits, which hopefully you're looking at nonprofits, I would stay far away from the for profits. They just don't have the success rate they need. But even though they're nonprofits, they are businesses, and each of them has their own business model. And the sooner you figure out their business model, the more informed a consumer, which we don't want to think of ourselves as consumers going to get education, but we are, the more informed of consumer we are. So that's the first part. And then the second part is every school publishes their cost of attendance. That's that big number. And we have now reached a time where that number can be over $100,000 at some universities per year.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be, but very few students actually pay that number. And I don't think very many parents and students understand that the cost of attendance is not necessarily what you're going to pay.
Right.
And you have to break it down to know what that business model is, to know what your specific family is going to pay, not the average, because we don't care about the average student. We care about your family. And that's really, it's opaque and it's often misunderstood.
Do you find that families are oftentimes potentially ruling out certain universities because of like the sticker shock of that big number?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Because, and I don't blame them. You know, if you saw that big, gigantic number and you didn't have the money saved or the disposable income for that, I wouldn't. I mean, that's like I say this all the time in my webinars. I'm like, we don't let our kids go out and just choose any car off the internet to buy, right? Because they'll come back with a Lamborghini. And we know that's not. But every year, 5 million parents, because that's how many are going off to college every year. Well, last year, not this year, but last year, they do that. They open up the internet and say, go choose any school you want, and then we'll talk about it. And it's like, oh my gosh. So I think a lot of parents are just like, that number is too big. We're not even going to look at that school, where that school may be very competitive for your student to get aid.
Yeah. Okay. So how do they figure that out? How do they dissect the business model to understand what they would actually be paying?
Yeah. So there's a couple ways. The easiest way is to come see me because I got it all in a database. I can figure it out super fast. But in lieu of that, you can go to each school is required to publish what they call their net price calculator. Now, the trick to that is every school that receives any federal funding is required to have that on their website. Some schools do a great job and they update it every year with their new policies. Other schools use a generic one, and it can be really well done or not well done. You can always call the financial aid office at any school or admissions and say, how do you treat your merit aid? A lot of them publish it online, but if they don't, you can always ask, what are your merit-based scholarships that you offer? And then financial aid office, what kind of need-based aid do you offer? The hard part about that is it's a lot of groundwork because you're having to look at each school. But when we're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars over 4 years, it's worth the legwork. We're not talking about a Honda Civic.
Right.
We're talking about a house, really.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. All right. So that's super helpful, is just kind of understanding what's available on a per university basis, which makes the work that you do super valuable, because to your point, it could be fairly laborious to figure that out. Once you've figured that out, what type of financing strategies do you typically recommend? I mean, listen, we do a lot of planning for education in our practice. And, we talk about the different sort of savings vehicles that you can utilize to fund college. But once it gets to be time to actually fund the education, what options do families have above and beyond the 529 plans that they may have kicked into, any sort of taxable brokerage or savings accounts that they have? What else is at their disposal, and how should they be thinking about everything else other than what they've been saving into for a period of time?
Yeah. So the first thing, I'm going to back up just a little bit. I promise I will get to your answer.
Yeah.
The first thing is anything a family can do to get credits beforehand is amazing, whether they can do CLEP out of it through a CLEP exam, AP classes, dual enrollment, anything you can do in high school to reduce that number is great. Again, looking at the university to see what kind of aid they're going to offer, because that can be worth 10, 20, even, I mean, my he'll be a freshman this year at college. He was offered a scholarship for $30,000 over the course of 4 years. That's a lot of money just
Yeah.
because he had achieved a certain achievement in high school.
Incredible.
So knowing some of those things in advance are really valuable to save that's where your big savings is going to come from.
Sure.
Then once we do that, your 529s, like you mentioned, any taxable brokerage, looking at Roths, if you have Roths, because you can always pull that principal out. And I know as a retirement specialist, we don't want to do that. But if we have the play for the future, it's sometimes better to do that than to borrow. Um, we can look at any kind of income, like part-time income for students, that they can do over the summer that helps contribute is great. Once we have done all of that and we've looked at all of our assets, the one thing I encourage families to really look at is their cash flow, because I think parents sometimes forget when my son's John, when little Johnny goes off to college, there are things I don't have to pay for anymore. I'm not paying for his sports. I'm not paying for uniforms.
Right.
I'm not paying for music lessons. And that all becomes cash flow that now I can put into college. So knowing what the schools think I can afford, which is another really important step, is knowing what each school thinks you can afford to pay, because that's different at every school,
Sure.
depending on whether it's a state school or private school. And then what I can actually afford and seeing if those numbers match up. It's when that delta hits. So the things we just talked about, 529s, Roths, taxable brokerage, et cetera. Then we're into a borrowing situation if there's still a delta. The federal government, I'm sure you heard with the, One Big Beautiful Bill Act restricted how much we can actually borrow from the federal government now.
Right.
So if I always recommend there are direct loans that the student takes out in their name, they can start freshman through senior year. I usually, in most cases, not all, because in our business, it depends. I usually recommend taking those even if you don't need them, because it locks that in. The last thing that we want is for a student to get to senior year and not be able to finish because they're short on money.
Yeah.
It's like a worst case scenario. And things change over 4 years.
Sure.
People close businesses, they lose jobs, things happen. So we start with kind of the direct loans. That gives you 27.
Sorry, Charlotte. So
Sorry.
getting that, maybe it might just be a safety net, right? To have
Mhm.
the student apply for the loan going into freshman year is a set. Even if you think you don't need it, you're typically recommending go have them get it in case you do need it and something happens during that 4 year stretch.
Yeah. And like I said, that's kind of a blanket rule of thumb, which I hate those in our business.
Yeah.
But number one, it's in the student's name. So it immediately sets up them for some credit and it builds up their credit score. Even if you decide as a parent, I'm going to go ahead and just pay that off. For example, my little Johnny's gone off to school. We just got that freshman loan because if you don't get it your freshman year, you can't get it ever again. It's a use it or lose it. So
Yeah.
we went ahead and applied for it. And I said, here's the deal, bud. If at the end of this school year, your grades, we came up with a GPA that we both feel is attainable,
Yeah.
you take care of it, I'll pay it off. And then you don't have to worry about it. If you don't, it's on you. That's the
All
deal
right.
we made.
There's a couple things I love there for our listeners. Number one is just sort of the flexibility that it gives the family around the financing. But most importantly, I love when kids have incentives and are able to learn and have it tied back to money. So I talk to a lot of our clients about sort of educating kids around finances, and that being a far better than even gifting them money is gifting them the knowledge and gifting them the education to make their own smart money decisions long term. And when you tie certain incentives to financial means, it really sort of fast forwards their learning and makes it feel like, I'm in a business now, and instead of just going to school. So I love what you did there. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, I think if I can piggyback on that a little bit, and this is just personal anecdotal, but I think it's really important. And one thing that I do for all of our clients as well is once we look at what the schools think we can afford, what we can actually afford, how we're going to pay for it, that delta, I take that borrowed amount and we extend it out of what is that going to look like over 10 years, 25, 30 years for both the student and the parent, like who's agreeing to pay for what. And what I try to do for students, because most of the students, they're 17 years old, and even our most financially literate That's a lot of zeros for most
Sure.
17-year-olds to
Sure.
really like digest, right?
Uh,
And so when I say, okay, if you're going to borrow, we'll just say the $27,000 in the federal direct loan, did this with my son. This is what your monthly payment will look like the day you graduate.
okay.
You're going to go off and be a business major from XY university. The average starting salary is $65,000, let's say.
Right.
So per month, that looks like this number. Then we're going to take out your taxes, and then you're going to have to take out your loan payment. And that's what you have to live on. And for some students, they're like, $1,500, that's a lot of money. And
I'm
I'm like,
rich. Yeah.
let's talk about that a little bit. And
Yeah.
so we go to like, where do you think you want to live? I want to live in New York City. Okay. What does an apartment look like in New York City? And it's a very like functional, just this is how much. So we can take that big giant number and put it into something that a 17-year-old, and I don't mean to disparage them, they just don't have a lot of experience with
Sure.
that many zeros. And it kind of puts it, and I will be honest, sometimes parents, when they're in that, I'll just figure it out, right? Because we don't want to say no to our kids.
Right.
It's an incredibly emotional decision. We want to make sure they have the best education, and it's really hard to say no. But when I say you're actually going to have to borrow $25,000 every year, that's $100,000. And to pay that off is over 25 years because we decided that 10 years is too much money. That's 25 years. If you are 50 years old, at 75 years old, you're still going to be paying $1,500 a month in a payment. Based on your retirement plan, is that doable?
Yeah.
Like at 70 years old, do you still want to be paying $1,500 if that's the agreement you have with your student? And sometimes that black and white spreadsheet is like, oh, okay, and when you say, at a 6% interest rate, $100,000 just became 250 for a bachelor's degree.
Yeah.
Some of these other schools are looking much better, right?
Got
So that's how we do that. And I think it's really valuable to do that exercise to actually put it in numbers that we can all kind of digest today.
digest instead of it being the big number that it's like I can't really just wrap my arms around that. And to your point, for kids, they don't have a real great context around like how that big number is actually going to affect their life. But when you start to break it down, it becomes a lot more tangible. I love that concept. All right.
Yeah.
I'm curious to get your thoughts on this because this is a concept and a question that comes up a lot in like my financial planning discussions with specifically young families. I want to hear your take on sort of where college trends are going, both in terms of tuition, which I think we know where that's going, but and then in terms of potential experience, especially in this AI era, right? Because I have a lot of families that have younger kids that they're planning for college, and they say to me, "I don't know that college is going to look the same when my kids go to school than when I went to school." So I'm curious to hear your thoughts around that, and if you've seen anything, excuse me, from your experiences that have showed maybe college evolving at all, given the the technology that we're endorsed with today.
Yeah. So first of all, we could do a whole podcast on both of those topics,
Yeah,
and we
sure.
could probably find people who are a lot smarter about it than I am. But you asked, so now you get my opinion. This is just the world according to Shauna. We are still seeing now, because the question that comes up a lot is college still worth it? And it is hard in some cases to justify that ROI, right? I'm
Yeah,
spending $400,000 and then my students coming out and working as a barista.
yeah,
It is really hard to make that argument, and I won't try and make it for that. But I do think there are schools out there that are embracing the fact that the world is changing and the workforce is changing. So looking at schools that are embracing that as opposed to bristling against it, I think is really important. I think in some ways college will become even more valuable as opposed to less valuable because right now those AI positions are going to those baseline skills, those worker bee skills.
hmm,
We don't need college to teach worker bee skills.
right,
We need college to teach critical thinking, management, leadership, which is what a college graduate will need in the workforce is to become that mid-level manager as soon as they exit the doors, as opposed to that worker bee entry level position.
sure,
So I'm seeing universities, especially as we did our college tours. I have my freshman coming up, and then I have a senior. So we have been out touring a lot of universities right now and
Okay.
watching the ones that are embracing that of we're we're educating the people who are going to manage AI as opposed to we're still stuck in this, we're creating it. So I think that's one thing that will change. I think the other thing that is going to become huge is employers really want that work experience. So the universities that are offering on the job training, co-ops, internships that are baked into the actual curriculum, not just it would be nice if this summer you went out and worked for your dad,
Yeah.
but universities that actually say we have programs to place you will come out on top because those students will get employed much faster. So that's kind of what I see going there. You asked about tuition. My hope is that the problem is the government decided to limit these loans in an effort, they said, to get tuition to stop climbing. And that's a great. And in theory, I love that idea because
Mhm.
college is becoming unaffordable except for those that have the ultimate, have resources. The problem is there are still too many of us out there and all of us as parents, there are still too many of us that are willing to pay the price. We are willing to take on massive loans. We're willing to not limit our children to these schools. And as long as we're willing to pay it as a consumer base, they will continue to charge it. So until we start saying no, it's going to continue to happen.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. Supply and demand, right?
Supply and
Uh,
demand. The other small part of that is some of these costs, and this is why we could get into a whole half hour. So I'll make this really short. A lot of schools, state schools, they used to get almost 80% of their funding from the state. And then as states started cutting their budgets for school, the schools had to make up for it in tuition. So they had to start attracting more students. To attract more students, they start putting in more amenities. I don't know where you went to college, but when I went to school a few decades ago, or more than a few decades ago, I didn't have a choice of a dining plan. I had one cafeteria on campus and they served one meal and that was what you got because they didn't have to attract us because
yep.
tuition was low. We all just went to the state school because there were only three to choose from. Now they have to put in climbing walls and multiple cafeterias with Chick-fil-A and to get students to come. And so that's part of where the problem came. And so now universities are stuck in, they did all these capital improvements. They're doing all these things to attract students, and that costs money. So they can't just drop the prices today because there's no lending. And now we have banks that are willing. Sally Mae just came out last week and said since the government um, loan that used to be up to the cost of attendance went away, we'll now offer that. So Sally Mae is now offering that loan, which is great for families that
Yeah.
were going to struggle to find funding for it. The downside is the funding's out there, so now parents will borrow it.
That's right. That's right. Yep. Well
So
said. All right. Amazing stuff. Really good insights, Sean. I want to switch gears a little bit and talk a little bit about you. So, first of all, your track from sort of being in a bigger financial planning, wealth management advising firm to being hyper specialized on helping families tackle college tuition. We always love on making sense of your money, telling people's story and specifically evolving as their career goes on to do more purposeful work that they're passionate about. What led you to do that, and what's been your experience in the time that you've been doing it?
yeah, so again, I was working with a lot of young professionals, but that were postponing these milestones. But then I also had one particular client, wonderful, just a wonderful client to have, loved her. She came to me about a year or so post divorce, very amicable divorce, but is one of those situations where he handled everything.
Right.
And then when they got divorced, she was like, I've got all this. Now what do I do with it? And we were talking about educating because at the time she had high school boys getting ready to go off to college. And I said, so what are we thinking? Like which kind of schools do they want to go to? Again, some of these questions, what are we looking to get out of it? And she said, well, you know what? My sons are at this private school. They've been working so hard. If my oldest gets into MIT, I'll just figure it out. Like he did all the work. He worked so hard. If he gets into MIT, we'll just figure it out. And I'm looking at her as a recently new divorcee who didn't quite get everything she should have in the divorce kind of thing, going, that doesn't match with your retirement plan, right?
Right.
Like it's going to be a struggle. And she's like, I'll just figure it out when we get there. And again, it was one of those like light bulb moments of if I had been there a few years before and we had been working with that family to start talking about expectations between parents, because her ex-husband had gone to a very prestigious private school, Ivy
Okay.
League school. She'd gone to a state school. She's like, state schools are fine. He was like,
Yeah.
nope, he's going to be my alma mater kind of kid. So if we can talk with parents early on about those expectations, financial expectations leading up to it, any kind of planning we can do years in advance, because as you know, the FAFSA, the federal aid student loan application, uses prior year tax year.
Yeah.
So by the time I have a client sitting down to fill that out, I can't do anything to plan for their income. But if I had gotten to them 2 years ago, we can say, you think about still going on sabbatical? Now's a good time for that.
Right.
Sell off a business. Let's make sure we do that before we do that tax year so that income doesn't hit all at once. You're going to take a distribution from your 401k to replace the roof. We're doing that. We're going to time when we do that.
Yeah.
And I can't do that if I don't get to families early enough. So that's kind of what sparked it, of just the sooner I can get to families and talk about this, the better off I am to help them in the long run.
Yeah, timing is so critical. We talk about timing a lot when it comes to taxes, but it is so important in education planning as well. That's really well said. All right. You have now collaborated on not one, but two books, which I know I see you have sitting behind you. I just finished the first one. So I want you to talk for a second about the books because I think our audience will really enjoy them.
Oh, these were passion projects that we came out of the AGC with, of just, here is this group of like-minded advisors. Let's share our knowledge with the world. So that's how the first book, which is that one over there. Sorry, that one.
You got it.
It just started like, what are we going to do? So it's a collaboration amongst all of us to share stories about financial planning and how it's not just for what some people think it's only for the rich, the people with yachts and second homes, that financial planning helps all of us at all income levels. So we wrote the first one. It's really good. I'm proud of it. But then we thought, what if we wrote another one that had kind of the so what factor?
Yeah.
So I read all these stories. What do I do with it? So that's, we did this one. It's called Even More Than Money, which is the sequel to More Than Money. Every story has reflective questions after it. So after you read the story, you can think about, is that like me? Is that like my parents? Is that like my friends? And then it gives you a question it's a more of a philosophical reflective, but then all of those questions lead up to the end of this section. There's an actual like action plan of how do you put it into place for your life. And then at the end, we talk about, if you wanted to hire professionals, what professionals would you need? How do you find them? How do you find reputable ones?
Mm-hmm.
What does that interview process look like? And then what would the engagement look like? Just to kind of help readers who have never been exposed to this world understand it isn't just about portfolios and stock returns.
Right.
There's a lot more to it. At least that's how we at the AGC see it. There's a lot more to it, of making, as we call it in the book, making you understand what your life is worth, not just your net worth.
Really well said. Powerful statement. All right. Now it's time to shift gears to the lightning round. So we're going to get to know you a little bit. All right. So here's how it works. First thought that comes to your mind could be one word. It could be a long drawn out thought, and anywhere in between. All right.
Okay.
Let's do it. All right. One meal for the rest of your life. What is it?
Fried chicken, mashed potatoes, mom style.
Mom style. I like it. One tool or piece of technology other than your phone or your computer that you can't live without.
Oh, that one's tough. That's probably my microwave. Does that count?
I guess it counts. Yeah, sure. That counts. It's technology. All right.
Yeah. All my crunchy friends
microwave
out there are not going to be happy, but I do like my microwave.
All right. I like it. Do you have a favorite quote or phrase about money or success?
I do. I have so many of them. I really like, good old Benjamin Franklin, penny saved is a penny earned, especially when it relates to college financing. Penny saved is a penny you don't have to borrow.
I love it. What's one habit that's had an impact on your success?
Oh, this one's so good. And I just started doing it in the last couple of years. I grew up in the mountains of Colorado. And if I go outside every day amongst the trees, even if it is literally to walk out my back door, get in the trees, feel the dirt beneath my feet, it starts the whole day off right. I mean, if I can go out and take a walk out there for an hour, hour and a half, that's the best. But even a few minutes to just to close my eyes, hear the trees, feel the feet, everything's grounded. And I remember where I fit into this big, beautiful world, and I'm just a small part of it.
I love it. What's one skill that you're intentionally trying to get better at right now?
It sounds silly, but actually reading,
Okay.
and reading well, as opposed to like fiction books, I just kind of race through, and nonfiction I tend to spend too much time with. So I'm working on how to read more books and more effectively.
I love it. I love it. One piece of advice you'd give your younger self.
Um, you're enough, and it's okay.
I love that. I love that. Very, very nice way to close. And then finally, if our listeners want to connect with you, collaborate, or work with you, where's the best place to find you, Shauna?
The best place to find me is at duefinancial.com. That's
Okay.
DUE financial.com. And I highly encourage, if you're not already working with Dan, which please do, but if not, go grab the book. Even if you're working with Dan, grab the book, look at the questions, ask Dan about the questions. I know he will love the conversation, but pick up the book, and enjoy it, reflect. They're great, like conversation starters while you're out with someone who's important to you. It's a good way to start reflecting on money if you haven't already done that, which everyone listening to this podcast, because we're making sense of money, but it's another
They're
resource.
reflecting, but to your point, I've only read the first one. I'm taking a trip later this week and I'm going to read the second one, which was just released. So I'm looking forward to that. But I will tell our audience, for folks that maybe don't have a great grasp around what true comprehensive financial planning is all about. To your point, if you think it's just portfolios and stocks and bonds, that's a very antiquated look at the business. And certainly there are still people that solely focus on that. But this gives you a really, what I liked about it is it applies financial planning to the lives. And that's what I'm really, really passionate about. And I know many of my colleagues in the AGC are as well.
Yeah.
Shauna, thank you so much for coming on today. Amazing chatting with you. Appreciate your insights. This was fun.
Thanks so much, Dan. Thanks to all the listeners. I love talking college planning and stuff. So I get excited anytime I get to do it. Thank you.
Very cool. That's it for the episode. You can find our podcast along with our newsletter and YouTube channel all for free at makingsenseofyourmoney.com. And as always, make sure to prioritize your version of a rich life.